After watching Dr. Zakir Naik's debates, it is clear his entire objection rests on one recycled line. Show me where Jesus said the exact words, I am God, worship me. Many Christians feel cornered by this line, not because the evidence for Jesus' divinity is weak, but because the demand itself is engineered to be impossible. This entire debate collapses under one truth that has been sitting in plain sight. First of all, let me begin by saying that this debate is not about whether the evidence exists. It's about the standard people expect. Jesus did not have to say, I am God in English for Jews to recognize his divinity. In Jewish culture, divine identity was never communicated through a literal self-label or a Western-style sentence. It was revealed through God's name, God's authority, worship received, sins forgiven, prophecy fulfilled, eternal titles assumed, and deeds only God could perform. Jesus did all of that consistently, publicly, and deliberately. In fact, if Jesus had literally said, I am God, every Jew in the room would have dismissed him as linguistically and theologically absurd. That is simply not how a Jewish prophet communicated divine identity. The people who heard him, friend and foe, understood him perfectly because he was invoking the categories of divinity they recognized. That is precisely why they reacted by attempting to stone him for blasphemy. So, when Dr. Zakir Naik insists, unless Jesus said the exact phrase, I am God, the evidence is invalid, he's not actually asking for proof. He's asking for something impossible, a demand that only makes sense in a time and language that did not exist. Demanding the exact English phrase is a category error. It's like asking Shakespeare to prove he wrote poetry by producing a PDF. In short, he is asking Jesus to speak like a 2025 English debater instead of a first century rabbi. This is a trap. As this debate rages on, nobody asks why Dr. Zakir Naik demands an unreachable proof. Let's unpack the tactics behind his argument. Number one, he sets the rules, so the only possible outcome favors him. If Jesus must say the exact English words, I am God, then the debate is over before it begins because Jesus did not speak English. He's not looking for answers, he's setting up a trap. Number two, he seeks self-preservation. Within his framework, if Jesus is divine, Islam is false. If Islam is false, the Quran is fallible. If the Quran is fallible, his identity, role, and community tie unravel. The rejection is not intellectual. It is psychological self-preservation. Humans don't resist arguments because they are weak, but because they are dangerous. Number three, he approaches the discussion as a judge, not a seeker. A seeker asks, what does the evidence show? A judge, on the other hand, asks, how do I invalidate this evidence? Dr. Naik filters, he doesn't evaluate. Anything pointing to the divinity of Jesus is automatically dismissed, reinterpreted, reframed, or ignored. Not because it is irrational, but because it threatens the position he holds and, unfortunately, the audience he influences. Number four, he exploits cultural gaps. Christians expect literal phrasing, but Jews didn't use literal phrasing for divine identity. He knows most Christians are not taught Semitic cultural context, so he weaponizes the gap. It's the same trick as demanding, show me the word Trinity in the Bible. Same structure, same trap. Number five, he relies on circular logic, not factual consistency. His logic, Jesus cannot be God. Therefore, anything that appears to show Jesus is God cannot mean that. Therefore, every verse must be reinterpreted. This is not reasoning. It is programmed belief, and it seems airtight only because it ignores reality outside its own bubble. Number six, he hides behind semantics. He claims, I just want clear, explicit words. But he doesn't want clarity. He wants Jesus to adopt his language, his culture, and his sentence structure. This is not a search for truth. It is semantic camouflage. Number seven, he uses denial as an intimidation technique. Denying obvious evidence creates the illusion of intellectual dominance. The more confidently he rejects, the more people assume he must be right. This is a rhetoric show, not honest inquiry. Dr. Zakir Naik's challenge collapses under its own weight because it demands something Jesus could not, would not, and should not have said. Jesus did not speak English, so requiring the literal phrase I am God is linguistically impossible. Secondly, the phrase I am God does not exist as a theological category in Judaism or Aramaic either. No Jewish prophet used it, no Aramaic speaker used it, and even God himself never introduced his identity that way because divine identity in scripture is always revealed by name, not by generic labels. You observe, I am Yahweh, or or I am who I am, never the English style phrase, I am God. In translations, English Bibles sometimes render it as I am God, but the original Hebrew conveys God's eternal covenantal name and identity, not a generic label. So, demanding Jesus to speak this literal English sentence would be culturally and theologically absurd. It's asking him to use a formula that doesn't exist in scripture, in Hebrew, in Aramaic, or in Jewish thought. Furthermore, the people who actually heard Jesus understood his divine claims perfectly through the only categories that made sense in their world: his authority, his actions, his titles, his forgiveness of sins, his worship received, and his use of the divine name. Jesus revealed his identity in the language and framework of his time, and his hearers recognized it instantly. This is why Dr. Naik's standard is not only unfair, it is logically incoherent. The only way to deny Jesus' divinity is to demand a vocabulary he never spoke and a formula his culture never used. The argument does not fail because the evidence is weak. It fails because the expectation is impossible. And if Dr. Naik still insists none of this counts unless Jesus uses a sentence invented centuries later, then the issue is not with Jesus, it is with the filter. Truth does not bend to our vocabulary. The real question is simple. Are we willing to see him on his terms, in his culture, with his words? That is where the debate ends and where honesty begins.